Hi, I'm Cora Villery,
I'm Morten,
and this is our project, Policies for Poverty.
Poverty. Poverty is a punishment for a crime that one did not commit. We're trying to understand and address it in a way that respects the dignity of every person.
How should we define and measure poverty today? Well, we decided poverty should be defined as the lack of access to all the basic necessities of life. We should measure poverty using the basic guidelines of the Supplemental Poverty Measure, or the SPM, along with some of the capabilities approach. But what does this even mean? First, what is access? Well, most people can agree that not enough money is the lack of access, as money is the root of everything. Money is what the OPM and the SPM both use to measure poverty. What are the OPM and SPM? We'll get into that later. But what about everything else? What if you had the money to buy some fruit, but you don't have access to a car to drive to the store and get it? Well, this is something that the capabilities approach tackles. The capabilities approach is an idea created by Amartya Sen to approach poverty and well-being from an ethical direction. It focuses on capabilities and functionings, meaning what an individual is able to do and what an individual has already done.
So how can it be measured? We can measure poverty through education. We can measure this through test scores, literacy rate, mean of education, and how well students do in school. Education. So when we look at these two people, Tina and Tony, they're the same people, but Tina has a college degree and a PhD, and Tony just graduated from high school or just went to high school. In education barrier, Tina is more likely to get work and more opportunities offered to her in job places that pay well than Tony, because Tina education is much higher, so there's more resources and there's more choices for her to choose from in terms of what she wants to do. And let's look at political control. Everyone has the right to vote, but someone might choose to vote and someone might choose not to vote. They have the capability to vote, but they have the choice to choose or not choose to vote or choose not to vote. Okay, bodily health. So life expectancy. For people to have better life, they need food, healthcare, and houses. We can measure the life expectancy for an individual life. Children experiencing poverty or going through poverty have higher chances of having nutritional deficits and developmental delays, and this in effect decreases their chances of surviving through childhood. With a good health, a kid can grow healthy and have a better life. But if they're born into a situation where they have no control of, this makes it harder for them to grow healthy.
So, should the capabilities approach be measured in our definition of poverty? For us, we say only a few metrics, specifically what was just mentioned, education, bodily health, and political control. Why only those three? Well, it is impossible to measure all the infinite capabilities a person can have, and so we can only measure a few of them without expending too many resources. And we find these important because consider these two people, Bob and John. Bob is well educated, healthy, and is able to vote and participates in elections every year. John dropped out of high school because he had to help support his family. He had no access to healthy foods growing up, so is not educated on what he should be eating, and he lives in a place where he is not able to vote. Now, because of these three different metrics, Bob is set up for a much better, more fulfilling life where he can have access to getting more money to get himself out of poverty, whereas John doesn't have those same abilities. Now, for the next part of the thesis, what are basic necessities? As the world progresses, what do we define as basic necessities? Many people agree people in poverty should have access to food, clothing, and shelter. But do people in poverty have access to anything else? Well, this brings us to Rector's argument. Rector argues that the average poor family in America has a TV, video games if they have kids, and even a car. What does that mean, though? Why are they considered poor? Well, what Rector didn't calculate in the calculations is that in some cases, it might be possible that a family in poverty has a car that they've had for a long time, but they're in poverty and they're not able to pay for gas. Or that they have something like a fridge, but they don't have access to a grocery store to get foods to fill the fridge. So we aren't using Rector's argument because we believe that Rector isn't paying close attention to anything deeper than surface level amenities. Okay, back to the OPM and SPM. How do we measure poverty in these ways? Well, the official poverty measure takes the household's gross annual pre-tax income. This basically means what the family makes in a year without accounting for taxes. Now the SPM is income minus non-discretionary expenses plus non-cash benefits. Because of this, we chose to use the SPM because it's more up-to-date. You can see this when looking at these two families. Family A makes $25,000 annual gross pre-tax income. Family B makes the same amount of money, but Family A is a perfectly healthy family. Family B pays over $5,000 per year in hospital bills. Now, in the OPM, it doesn't account for those hospital bills, and it says that both of these families have the same amount of money, deserve all the same resources from the government. They're the same amount in poverty or not, when really Family B is at a disadvantage because they have to deal with lots of health issues and they have to take out their income for that. For that reason, we're using the SPM. In conclusion, poverty should be defined as the lack of access to all the basic necessities of life. We should measure poverty using the basic guidelines of the Supplemental Poverty Measure, along with some of the capabilities approach. We hope you enjoyed our presentation and understand why we chose this as our thesis.
Thank you.